Everybody, welcome to the Buyer Said Yes, Now What webinar. It's Steve and Deb, and we're here to talk tonight about basically what happens with your products in getting distribution, retail distribution specifically, when you're going to go into a large size grocery, mass, or drug store. And that's what this is about. So we're going to break it down into a couple of different areas, and you can either use the chat box if you would like to put questions in. Obviously, if you're listening to a recording, you can't do that. We will also have time for Q&A at the end so that you can save your questions up if you want to. So, hey, the buyer said yes. You've done a presentation. Maybe it's at Albertsons, maybe it's at Safeway, maybe it's at Stop and Shop, and you got an okay. Couple of things. First of all, double check that they actually said yes. Many times a buyer will indicate that he or she likes your product, that they're considering your product, they're going to put it in front of a committee. Yes should mean yes, meaning we are going to take your product into distribution. The second thing you do is remember to clean up. So if you've done a cutting in front of the buyer, a sampling in front of the buyer, there's nothing buyers hate worse than when people leave their stuff after they've gotten done because they're so excited that they got accepted. Third thing, break out the champagne. By all means, this is what you've been working for, and this is a time to celebrate. But guess what? Now is when the real work begins. First of all, welcome to Big Retailers' World. What's their world all about? Well, when it comes to selling your products through these retailers, it's key to remember that the retailer basically controls everything. Retailer controls the item selection. So if you have 5 products, the buyer only wants 3, they're only taking 3. They control placement. So this means where in the store you're going to go, they control. You may think you want to be in grab and go near the deli. They're going to put you in the center cookie aisle. That's just the way it goes. Retailer also controls the price. So whatever they buy from you at wholesale, they can price it any way they want. They may take a 20% margin. They may kick it up 100%. It's entirely up to them. They also control promotion. Now, there are portions of promotion that are negotiated with you, but they control how those promotions work. They control the depth of a promotion, if it's a discount, all of those other things. They control data, meaning they understand what's being sold, when, and how, and you will have to work with them to be able to get some of that information, and also with a distributor or a broker if you have those. You can, of course, if you have the budget to do so, you can go out and buy your own data, but for the most part, you're going to be relying upon that from the stores. And they also control terms. And by controlling terms, that simply means that how you're going to get paid, when you're going to get paid, they control. And there are no quote unquote standards in the industry, but they range anywhere from Walmart pays usually within 30 days. Some companies pay out as late as 90 days. So it's just who you're working with, and you can figure that out with the buyer in that conversation. So the question is, how does my product actually get on shelf? And it's amazing. You talk to people about dealing with grocery stores, drug stores, large mass merchandisers. There's a huge situation with how products get into the store and get on the shelf. So the first thing is an onboarding process. Every major retailer has an onboarding process. They're all a little different, but they're all basically the same. And so they all involve basically keeping track of your product and getting it into the system, so the supply chain system, to be able to get on the shelf. This involves figuring out the distribution and the logistics behind your products. And this varies as to whether your product is a really nice, clean, dry product in a bottle that we don't have to worry about going bad, to grapes that are going to go bad in a week and we need to get them into the store. So the process, and again, I'll just back off a little bit here, and that my experience with this is there's wide variables, but you need to be prepared for the variables. And it basically is that from the time the buyer says yes and you finished your champagne, you can have your product in some stores on the shelf as quick as 6 weeks. You can also, it can take as long as 6 months for that, after the yes, for your product to actually be on the shelf. And that's going to vary by a whole bunch of things, but basically the larger the order, the larger number of stores that you're being put into, the longer the process is going to take. And in some categories in the store where there's category management involved, they may only change the product set once a year. Most of them are twice, but there are ones that are only once. So he may say, she may say, hey, welcome on board in January, and by June, you may have a product on the shelf. Just be prepared for that. Retail onboarding is a process. It's called onboarding because it's like going on a big ship. But the reason it's a process is because there are a whole series of requirements that a retailer has that every vendor selling in that store has to meet. And there's good logical reasons behind it. In addition to that, in the onboarding process, if you are not familiar, you will become very familiar with slotting, free fills, and some other surprises. This basically is a way that retailers offset the cost of changing all the shelves and putting your product in. Some, in terms of slotting fees, may charge you on a per SKU basis. It may be $5,000, it may be $3,000, it may be $20,000. It depends upon the store. Many stores, especially smaller chains, will accept free fills, and a free fill basically means that for every SKU that they've approved to go in the store, you will provide them with the first case free of charge in order to fill that space on the shelf. In worst case scenarios, you may be hit with slotting and free fills, but let's hope not. There's some other surprises. They include things like return policies, other types of more formal business relationship surprises. But the two biggest ones in the pocketbook immediately are slotting and free fills. We'll also talk a little bit more about categories, the reviews, and expectations, because what we want to do and the purpose of the webinar is to have you understand better about what to expect when you get the yes. The first thing you'll receive at some point in time after the meeting is going to be, or the phone call or email or however you get it, is you'll get an onboarding package, probably by email. It's a document package. It's a multi-page file. In the case of Whole Foods, it now exceeds 40 pages. The good news is that if you're going into Whole Foods, everybody else's is less, so you'll have already covered all the bases. Basically, it covers the information needed in order to place your product within the retailer system. They will talk about codes and their requirements. So congratulations, you have a UPC code. Guess what? Just like Amazon, each retailer has their own code as well. Some subscribe to a global coding system for product descriptions. There's a whole gamut of things that you'll run through to basically list all of this information out. You'll have to have your UPC codes, your individual case codes, and then any other retail code that's required by that retailer. The onboarding package will generally also explain to you about promotional plans and allowances. Promotional plans are how you are going to support and help market the product in their stores. And that usually involves, for people who are in smaller brands, it usually involves temporary price reductions and also allowances. An allowance is basically just a reduction in your wholesale price that you allow the retailer to have. In general, retailers like to introduce your product through an allowance. So after you've given the first case free, we now want you to give me the second case at 15% off. The idea behind this is that traditionally at retail, when a new product shows up on the shelf, the retailer likes to have that product promoted at a lower price, or a TPR, a temporary price reduction. Why that is, I really don't know, because if I've never seen the product before, the fact that it's 30% cheaper doesn't really make any difference, because I don't know what the price was to begin with. I'm just looking at a tag on the shelf, if I'm even looking at the tag. But allowances are pretty standard in the industry. And when we talk in our classes about basically depth of allowances and how you can sometimes negotiate those to be able to get yourself in a better financial position. What's included in that onboarding package? Lots of instructions. Instructions as to how they receive, if you're going through a distributor, how they work with that distributor. You will have a new item form generally, which you will fill out, which will include your UPC code. You'll have to put in all of your weights and measures, the weight of your case, however you're delivering it to them, all of that information. The promotional offer form is where you agree to a plan to support that product. And let's just say that, in a typical instance, that would be, for a small brand, would be probably 3 or 4 temporary price reductions during the year. At least one coming if you have any seasonality in your product during the high season of your product or just before the high season of your product. So that's generally what they expect from smaller brands. So larger brands or a larger commitment, they're also going to ask about using their advertising vehicles, in-store advertising, and other things that they require. At this time, you have told them already that you have insurance, but this form is going to ask you for proof of that insurance. So you're probably going to have to get something from your insurance company. It'll also require a signature form from the chief officer of the corporation, the company that they're buying from. You'll also have an EDI setup form. And that generally tends to be how you will do business with the company financially. So in other words, this is a part of the PO process and how you get paid. Most of the larger retailers now use electronic form of payments. You don't get a check. If you're just at the 2 Albertson stores, you'll probably get a check, or if you're dealing with a Draegers or drivers or whatever in the Bay Area, you'll probably get a check. But for most, it's going to be an EDI. It'll be a direct deposit. We talk a little bit about what's expected. Again, some people get really surprised about this. So now that the product is actually in the store, the retailer expects that you're going to market your items and your brand to their shoppers. That's part of your responsibility, not their responsibility. You're going to be expected to promote within the store. So that's going to be demos, that's going to be your TPRs. It may be other types of promotions you may be asked to participate in depending upon your category. And then you're also going to be asked to promote in-store vehicles like their flyer or their contests or whatever else that they're doing that are promotional vehicles. Generally, the smaller you are and the first year or whatever that you're in, you're probably not going to have to worry about that. Your biggest headache is probably going to have to be demoing. But down the line, this will be something you will have to deal with. And it's part of how you put together a marketing budget to support your product once it gets in store. You'll also be expected to resolve any consumer issues that come up with your products. So if there's something happening, your caps are screwed on too tight or whatever else is, you hear back, you're going to have to take care of that as the vendor. You will be expected to demo your products. Sampling and demoing is big in almost all stores now. And it also, for many of the larger retailers, is a profit center, meaning they charge for you to do that, and therefore you contribute to their bottom line. In demoing products, you sometimes can bring in your own product to demo, but other times you actually have to purchase the product demo from the retailer. But that's all figured out in your onboarding package. What's also expected is that you help the retailer maintain their margin. So their margin, whether it's 40% or 50%, 30%, whatever it is, they want to be able to maintain that margin. If your product is in and starts moving slowly, they're going to want to get a temporary price reduction to see if that picks up, to see if maybe it's priced too high. But they expect that you as a vendor are going to do that. That's not something that that they have to take a reduction in their profit, although they may, and many stores do, particularly with new items, is they will share in that. They'll lose a little of their margin, you're going to lose a little of your margin, we're going to reduce the price in on the shelf. But don't be surprised if in fact you see a price maintained, but the margin that you give or the allowance you give to that retailer in fact goes in their pocket. That also happens. In the end, this is a logistics business. It happens to be a business with food and drugs and supplements and small goods, but it's basically a logistics business. And efficiency in logistics is how most of the major retailers really make their money. It's logistical because they need to know where everything is. So you can imagine that you have 30,000 SKUs in a store. They need to know where those products are. And there's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. First of all, they need to replenish. They don't want to be out of stock on an item. So they need to understand how that item is turning, and they need to know how to get more of it quickly into the stores. They need to keep items in code. Now, if you're a dry grocery item or you're a small jewelry items, there's no code situation. But if you are a perishable item in any way, then they need to make sure that they're not selling product that's out of code, meaning beyond the date which you've established, the shelf life date that the product is in there. In a bad case scenario, they need to be able to execute a recall. So if something happens in your product and there's a recall, part of the reason all this logistical stuff and all of this onboarding and codes and everything that they add is so that they can go back and get that product out if they need to. And last but not least, they need to dispose of the product. In the case of a recall, dispose of it, or they need to dispose of it when it goes out of code. And that method of disposal may be to destroy it. The method of disposal may be to send it back to you. And so you will need to be prepared for that, and you will talk to your distributors about that as you go forward, because that's one of the things that oftentimes happens is as a big surprise is that you put an order into a store, 6 months goes by, and you get half of that product back or a third of that product back. Shouldn't happen, but it does. We talked about logistics. Now let's talk about distribution. So this is the art and science of moving your products to where they can be sold. And if it talks about distribution, this is what we're talking about. Retail distribution specifically, there are several different types. Self-distribution, that's what you do now, where you are taking the product to the retail outlet or putting it in the store. You may even be putting it on the shelf at this point. The second level is a distributor. So that's a third party who purchases the product from you and then redistributes it at a store level or a warehouse level to the retailer. And traditionally, this is where smaller products going into retail end up. They end up going first with a distributor. When you get larger, or if you deal with a highly perishable item in some categories, you will go direct, meaning you will ship stuff from your warehouse to the retailer's warehouse or distribution center, where they then will distribute it to the store level. But again, that's usually reserved for high turn items, highly perishable items, and larger brands. And then third party are basically distributors to distributors, and we'll talk a little bit about that. They handle items. There are some things like boat batteries and other things that you'll find in a store during a particularly seasonal period. They're usually taken care of by a company who buys those by the truckload and then sells them to regional distributors who in fact go in and put them in. And the reason for this is these are items that may turn only 1 or 2 or 3 a year, but the retailer figures they have to have them in there because you as a shopper may need that particular item. So self-distribution, the way we all start. What's great about self-distribution? You control it. It's ultra reliable. You are going to get the product there and you're going to get it on the shelf. It's great. You can totally control the situation. What's bad about it? It's one of the most time-consuming things you do. And as you start being more successful in sales, you end up spending more and more time in distribution, to the point where, as about 3 years ago, I had a meeting with a client, and in the first conversation, at the end of the discussion, he said, Steve, I've been thinking about buying a truck and put one of those wraps on it with my brand. It's like, do you really want to buy a truck? But that's where it goes if you're successful. Direct distribution, we talked about real quick, but it's your warehouse to theirs. It's larger brands and volumes. Also involves perishables, anything where we need to take time out of the system. One of the other aspects of direct distribution is DSD, which stands for direct store delivery. And so direct store delivery is where my truck pulls up in front of the store, my guys and gals grab the stuff out of the back of the truck and go in and place it on the shelf. This is very common with perishable items, very common with snack items, like items that move in very large volumes quickly. So like Frito-Lay, all your Frito-Lay, Ruffles, all those stuff, that all comes in DSD. Frito's truck sits outside, puts it in the store. You see them sitting out there. Bread is another one where, bread has 3 or 4 days it can be on the shelf, and that's it. It's got to come off. Bread trucks are lined up every morning outside stores doing this. So that's direct store delivery. Direct distribution in any form is great work if you can get it, because it allows you to be able to cut out a distributor, which means more margin for you. But distributors have a job to do, and we need them, and they have their place. They are in the logistics business, as we mentioned, and just to remember, logistics business. They may be foodies, they may be health nuts, but they're still in the logistics business. They purchase and resell the product in general. Like I said, there are some consignment folks out there, but in general, what they're supposed to do is work with you to figure out to the stores that they distribute how many of your items they can place within a 2-week or 3-week period, and they will purchase that from you, and then they will go divvy it up as they wish. For some retailers, distributors actually help manage certain sections of the stores. This is very prevalent in health, natural, other odd types of product, groupings that are out there, where in fact the buyer does not want to pay a tremendous amount of attention to it because there's not enough profitability in that section. And the distributor can basically take care of it because the distributor knows what's selling in all the other stores, so can help manage the section. And you may notice in some stores, distributor goods that come in by a distributor, in fact, have a different shelf tag than the ones that come from the back room in the warehouse. If there's another color tag to the right or left of that color, it may mean that that's a distributor managed product, and then the personnel who are in the store don't deal with those products, and that's how they know not to do that. In the end, it's best to remember that a retailer is that a distributor is beholden to the retailers they work with. And that's whether it's UNFI to Whole Foods, or your regional distributor to Safeway, or to Wegmans. Your products come and go, the retailers will always be there. And so that's their relationships. And that's how they also help you, because they've already developed extensive relationships with the buyers, with the category managers, people in merchandising, and that's what you really want to use the distributor to help you do. Other things about distributors: they are mostly regional. To the right are two exceptions to that rule, KeHe and UNFI. UNFI, by the way, is referred to as UNFI. There is a United Grocers wholesaler out there and a Unified Grocers wholesaler out there, but they're not UNFI. UNFI, United Natural Foods, and they are the, of course, supplier to Whole Foods. So if you go into Whole Foods, you're a smaller brand, you will be going in through UNFI system. But the rest of the distributors are mostly regional, and that's because, again, they were born out of logistics, and so they only covered a certain area. Also, the regionality means that if you're a smaller brand, and particularly when you're in the NOSH market, natural, organic, specialty, healthy, ethnic, you probably want to begin working, if you can, with a regional distributor to get into stores, because UNFI and KeHe have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of SKUs that they're managing and whatever, and you're one more into a system. You really want to try to stay with a regional distributor if you can to start with. And when you go into a different region than wherever you're producing, wherever you live, that distributor is also going to have some knowledge of that market that you don't have. Distributors, they get paid out of your wholesale. And some people have a little problem with how this works, but basically it is that you establish a wholesale price, and the relationship with the distributor is he buys or she buys at that wholesale price and deducts 30, 20, whatever % off of that as their margin. That's how it works. So they should not take your price up. In fact, they should be selling at your wholesale price, but that's how they do it. Oftentimes, starting out, if your volumes are low, a distributor may charge you also a monthly fee of some kind to just keep the bookwork going and whatever. They can help you with sales, but they are not salespeople. That's not what they're there to do. They will help you get into stores. There are some stores where they will actually place your product because they can do that. But it's not their responsibility to sell your product. It's your responsibility to sell the product, and the distributors is to make sure that they have product and they can get it into the stores. They manage relationships with their retailers really well, and that's one of the things you want to do with them, is help exploit that, is to get a better understanding of the expectations of retailers, and talk to them about some things that they know at that retailer before you go in and make your pitch to the buyer. In managing distributors, the other thing is for you to understand their business is a real big help. So if you lower your expectations, you're going to be happier. That's what they say. So lower your expectations, understand the business that they're in. Be a nice squeaky wheel. There is no doubt that you can get more attention from a distributor by communicating with them. But if you're calling them every 15 minutes asking whether or not that order was delivered or what happened over at store number 137, that's not going to help your relationship with them. Help them help you. So if you have sales materials, you have your sell sheet, you have extra samples that you can provide, you can give them to them. They'll get them into some places where you want them to go. So help them help you. Let a distributor have their margin. One of the things that I know frustrates a lot of my clients is the distributors are always very protective of that margin. It frustrates the hell out of distributors that their people they're buying from are always trying to somehow cut their margin. So when you come in and say you're going to do a 15% TPR for 4 weeks at Safeway, that doesn't affect the distributor's margin. That's not part of what they are involved in. They're getting paid to move boxes so much per box. And the other thing is to consider the idea of selling in front of them. And what that means is that when you're going to have a relationship with a distributor, you should be coming to the distributor with some accounts already. You should be bringing them business, and you should have already established this, and you're now self-distributing, but you're going to turn this over to them. They feel much better about dealing with people who have established their companies and have already sold product in. If you haven't sold anything into retail, haven't been in front of a buyer, don't even bother talking to a distributor, because they're not interested. They're interested in people who've already established some amount of success, proven the validity of the product, that the pricing is probably okay, and we can do that. They will back you up if you sell in front of them. So let's talk quickly about plans. I know everybody's plan, another plan. Help me. Okay, well, first of all, you need a distribution plan, and there are several reasons why. The first and largest reason is you need to better understand the market that you're in or going into. So as you grow, you want to know who are the stores out there that can best support my product, where can I sell the most amount of units, and who are the distributors that in fact work with those stores. Because in some cases, you may be required to work with a particular distributor. In the case of Whole Foods, you will be required, if you're accepted in Whole Foods, to come in through KeHe if they have stuff in your category, because that's, or excuse me, UNFI, because that's their contract with UNFI specifies that's how that's going to happen. Some other retailers have relationships with other distributors, but in general, they'll know who in the circle, the buyer will know who in the circle of distributors he or she wants you to come in with. Distribution plans start with where you are, where are you selling, farmers market included, wherever we are, and then look at where you want to go. So you say, you know what, in 2020, I want to be in 100 stores. How are you going to do that? Well, there's 14 co-ops, there's 3 of these guys over here, there's the produce market, whatever it is, you're going to be a plan where you want to go. And then you draw the line between where you're now and where you need to go. And then you know who to sell to, who to go to. And again, in general, about 10 to 15 different accounts is what a distributor is going to want to see before they're going to entertain taking your brand to market. The distribution plan also includes an overview, or what I like to call your mission. Your mission is what you're going to do, how you're going to grow the business. And one of the things that you quickly, we talked about this in the webinar where we focused a little bit on the conundrum between production and selling. The more you sell, the more you have to produce, and the hours don't expand. You also have to focus, because you can't be everywhere at once. You have to talk about where you're going to spend your time as the founder or the principal person in the business, either doing demoing or doing selling, and flying back and forth, from Portland to LA to Chicago. It is probably not the best way to build the business. It's probably better to take a look at a plan that allows you to be able to build up in a region, in a city, in a region, and then move that out. I like to see 3 years of a distribution plan. Why? Because I think 5 years is just way too far out there and too many things happen. 1 year is like I'm working today on stuff that I should be doing next year. So I like to see 3 years, because it gives you, it's practical. You can still point things in the direction for 3 years. It's also inspiring, because those numbers should look so good at the end of 3 years that you want to keep going and power through. With your distribution plan, start out with your low-hanging fruit. So what that means is, if you have a high-end product, or you have a 100% naturally organic, plant-based, whatever it is, start with where those people shop, whether that's Whole Foods or whether that's your local health food market or your co-op, or start there, because that's a lot better than going and knocking on a door at a Stop and Shop or a Publix and saying, hey, I have this wonderful organic stuff. Much, much better to go for the low-hanging fruit first. Get some wins, get to where you can work with a distributor, and then move on. And then model. You guys who've been in our classes, who have been in workshops with us before, you know, I talk about this all the time. There are many, many different scenarios that you can look at to figure out how best to go to market and how best to grow your business. And the way you do that is by modeling, or some people call it forecasting. I call it modeling because I like to take into account more than just the numbers. I like to run a set of numbers. And then, for instance, if you have a distribution plan and your distribution plan over 3 years says that I'm going to be producing 40,000 units, and right now your maximum capacity is 4,000 units, well, what that means is that sometime along this line, we need to figure out how you're going to be producing those units. So that may be a co-packer, that may mean you making a capital equipment purchase, it's and those things. But the distribution plan basically shows what's going to be happening. And then as you begin to develop a marketing budget for supporting those products, the distribution plan also says, you know, if I have X amount of dollars to spend supporting a product, I'm going to have to spend it at the places where I'm in distribution first and where I want to be in distribution next. And maybe, just maybe, I need to not increase my distribution this year because I don't have the money to support that distribution. Because many companies distribute themselves right out of business. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. There always has to be money available to support the product. So model, model, model. Have a distribution plan, very important. Prepare an outline. What's in an outline? The outline is where am I being sold now? Where do I want to be sold at the end of year 1, 2, and 3? And am I going to do this on a regional basis? Am I just going to sell to outdoor stores? So I'm going to do Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, REI, however you're going to do that. Choose your path. There are many paths. The most logical one, the one that most food companies I work with follow, is geographic. So they're basically looking at, I'm selling in my area right now, I'm selling to stores I can supply. There's some guy in Chicago that wants my product, but we're not going to do that. But choose that path. There are other people who will choose, for instance, a channel. So they'll run an outdoor channel, or they're going to sell only in the drug channel, or health channel. So the health food stores, there's a whole channel, health foods, vitamins, GNC. They may take that product only into those stores, even if it's food product, because they know that more of their target audience is shopping in those stores. And you want to model growth, and you want to forecast that growth, and you want to do it on a rolling basis if you can. What that means is that right now we're talking about 2020 and 2021 and then maybe 2022 if you're going to do the 3-year model. But it doesn't stay stagnant, it rolls. So what you're doing is you're looking out every month, you're looking 3 years out every month, and you change how you're going to go forward with scenarios to see if, well, if I did this instead of this, this is where I end up at that period of time. And that's very important. I really, really hope that most of you have that. And if you don't have it, if you have it in your head, put it down on paper, put it into Excel or Google Sheets, and get a real grasp of where you can go with the business, because scaling happens very quickly, and that's what you want to have happen. So that's distribution kind of in a nutshell. We're at the questions portion of tonight's webinar. So if folks want to hit in on the chat, and we'll try to answer specific questions for you. If we don't happen to get that, or you can't type it in fast enough right now, we'll be sending out a link to you for the recording of this, and that will be from an email that you can respond to, or whatever you want to try to get those questions answered. I'm more than happy to do that, and you can send an email and we'll try to get it answered.
What happens, someone wants to know, when you have a product that goes back, you were talking about that, from the distributor bought it from you, and then it gets returned by the retailer. What happens in that? Right.
So what happens is that basically the distributor returns it to you. And so what they will do is they will help you figure out what to do with the product. So there's 2 types of returns. Well, there's a lot of types, but basically 2 types. The 2 types are dated product, which is deemed unsaleable at that point. And so an unsaleable will be returned by you by the distributor. And by the way, they won't return their margin. Invoice whatever that whatever that amount is. So that's with considered unsaleable product. There's a gray area, which is we have product, we're a retailer, we have product on the shelf, it's not moving as fast as we wanted it to. And by our calculations, and Target is famous for doing this, by our calculations, you are not going to move this stuff by the time the date runs out. Or if it's a long date, we just don't think it's going to move. And so they'll pack it up and they'll put it in what they call their reclamation center. And the reclamation center basically is a big warehouse, a backfilled warehouse, where they say, come and get it. If you have a distributor, your distributor is going to come and get it because they're required to do that. And you're going to end up taking that product back. So that's not usually it's not usually a big challenge, because most of the larger brands that work with a Target or, are kind of prepared for that and they understand. But oftentimes smaller brands who get a big order from a Target or that type of store don't necessarily know how fast they're going to turn. And quite frankly, the buyer or the category manager doesn't really know either, because maybe the product is somewhat unique, and you can end up, it can be a very, very expensive thing. So, but the answer is you pay for everything. It just, if you figure it out, you're going to pay for everything. There was a time about 5 years ago when the the industry cry over reclamation centers of where products were being turned back out, there was a lot of industry pressure for retailers to not do that as often as they were doing it, because it was pretty obvious that they were just doing risk management and being risk averse. And really, when they take the product in and put it on the shelf, they should share some of that risk with you. And this basically was just not doing that and just saying, no, we're going to cut our losses because we really don't have any losses. I mean, we have lost opportunity, we have lost possible profit, but the truth of the matter is we're going to move this stuff off, and you're going to end up paying for it.
Another question is, they're not getting a lot of support from their distributor. How can they
right so like many sales oriented relationships, it usually starts out really warm and fuzzy. And my experience, the collective experience that I've had with my clients from big to little, is that original relationship is based on highly optimistic perceptions. And the distributor thinks they can really do something with your product, and they want to convince you of that. You think you can do really great things with your product, and the buyer, when the buyer says yes, like the beginning of, like any honeymoon period, the buyer thinks that your product is really going to perform well in the store too. Otherwise, he or she would not be putting it into the store to begin with. But the support thing happens when a couple of things. Number one is you don't give the tools to the distributor that they need or that they ask for, that they want. If your production is off, and let's just say you haven't gotten all the stuff boxed up yet and they have a truck waiting outside to pick it up, that's not good. Not having proper sales materials with the stuff on it that they need in order to communicate at the store level. All of those things, responsiveness, all of those things go into, working with a distributor. What the distributor really wants is your success. And what you really want from the distributor is the support, and you want them to do the job that they're doing. The other place that you can, for instance, you can get into a situation with a distributor is in your packaging. For instance, if you have difficult packaging, or your case size is too large, or all that, anything that again affects the logistics of, it's not how your product tastes, it's not your price, we've already gotten through that, but it's the basics of, if your case size is too big, what that means is that the distributor's truck pulls up to the store, and the guy or gal has to go in the back and cut your case to put X number of items into this store, and then it rattles around while they drive to the next one. They don't want to do that. So, again, maintaining the idea, remember, it's a logistics business, and anything you can do to help that is something that will get you a long ways with the distributor.
Good. I think that's all the questions.
It looks like that's it.
Yeah, on the questions. So.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So, any rate, if there's any other questions, or if you're listening to this in recorded form, we will be happy to take questions at our email address anytime. This webinar was, of course, brought to you by Kitchen Shelf, and we'll just talk a little bit about, for if there's any confusion, which there probably isn't, but Kitchen Shelf is the educational arm of Next Level Brands, and we deal with Kitchen Shelf with classes, workshops, and of course, webinars, including Ready for Retail, which is if you are trying to launch into retail. It's a course that basically takes you through the entire gamut from, how your product gets started, to COGS, to pricing your product properly, to dealing with distributors, to basically drilling down with all those things. Launchpan is another course we have coming up. We're trying to finish it. We think we're very close. Launchpan is going to be for anybody that you know, probably not you guys, but anybody you know out there who wants to get into the business. It's very much a primer course. It literally starts with, you have a product, you don't have a UPC code, maybe you don't even have proper packaging yet, but you can learn the basics to get that up and be able to sell at farmers markets and maybe a little local retail.
And Ready for Retail, by the way, if you're selling at 1 or 2 stores, you still are in the for retail.
Yeah,
it's
Ready
really
for Retail
getting into
is
the
big
bigger,
retail.
Yeah, bigger retail.
Right. And of course, we also have a master class, which will be coming up, and startup coaching, which we work with some folks who are in startup mode and just growing. On the other side of the coin, Next Level Marketing is the consulting and coaching arm of Next Level Brands. And we work with helping you create a distribution plan if you need some help doing that, with marketing reviews to talk about how you're going to support your products, how your overall marketing is coming, any support for new products that you're going to be launching in the next year and how to do that both in retail and in e-commerce. And last but not least, business coaching. So if you need someone to work with you who basically can help you about what's going on around the corner, or to help you set deadlines and other basic input into your business, that's available on the Next Level Marketing side.
So just one point on that too is it's also the reality check. Since Steve has been doing this
The reality
for
check, yes.
a long time, it's a big reality check, and haven't thought of it yet.
Right.
So kind of looking forward and things that you don't know what you don't know, and before it becomes a red flag.
It's the buyer says yes, now what?
That's it.
That's what we do. So folks, thanks so much.
You can find us at, which I don't have on here, at kitchenshelf.com.
That's kitchen, the number 2 shelf.com. And also nextlevelbrands.com or nextlevelmarketing.com, both with 2 X's. You get twice the X.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, folks, and we'll see you next month.